Hi everyone, this is Evgeny and you're watching the first video in a new series. It's Google ADK, which stands for Agent Development Kit. An interesting thing and why we decided to take a look at that new framework is because, well, it's from Google and we have some experience with LangGraph, LangChain. There's a lot of this theory around the agents, so it will be interesting to compare it. And the main reason probably, and the biggest one, because it's Google and it supports Python and Java at the same time. So this is a really crucial point for me because we do have tons of developers who know Java, who know Spring, and they are not aware of Python at all. So it could be a really good gift for them. So let's take a look at that together. How good is that? If it makes sense to learn it and construct something like an agent using this framework. And again, once again, before we dive into the stuff and really learning about this Google thing, I wanted to mention this video is still supervised and extremely highly supervised by angry cats. So if you are not curious, or if you are curious what are those, if you don't know what are those, you have to check the link, the merch is there. And meanwhile, we are continuing. Alright, what do we have here? This is a standard Java project. I'm using Maven for building as a building tool. And basically, let's give it a try and start from a very simple example. We're going to implement React agent and this reasoning acting one. And I think we start from research agent class. So I'm not going to type it in a live mode. I'm just going through the code and explaining different details so we can save our time and maybe we can spend time more discussing some things instead of watching me typing something. So we have the main class as a research agent here. And basically, or maybe let's start from Maven. So basically what you have to do, you have to add some dependencies, and this is Google ADK. And the current one at the time of filming this is 3030, right? So you have this Google ADK, the main core dependency, and at the same time you have this Google ADK dev for development for having this UI interface. I will show it to you basically at the end. And another thing, I'm going to replicate the same example we did in LangGraph series. So we're going to create agent capable of doing the research in internet. So we need to have a tool for that, and I'm going the easiest way. I'm just introducing new dependencies from LangChain for J. That one contains Tablet search, and this one I'm going to reuse. So it will be exactly the same agent as we did in LangGraph series. Okay. And we're going back to our research agent, the main point of our discussion today. So what's here? First of all, we need to define the root agent, and this is a based agent class. And it comes from Google ADK agents. An interesting point is that the name should be root agent if you want to reuse it in the web UI when you're debugging the agent. Or maybe this is the current recommended way of constructing your agents, but you should have this static final base agent variable with the name root agent. And practically we're creating it on the start time, and here what's happening, we are using the LLM agent, and this is LLM agent is the name from Google for React agent. So it's agent based on LLM, and the other agents, we are going to look at that later, maybe in next videos, but other agents, it's kind of flow, for example, when you create something else, like all these different architectures. So LLM agent is this React one. And here we are defining the name of the agent. For our small example, maybe it's not so important, but basically when you have this multi-agent system, for example, with supervisor, the name is a significant part of the agent, right? Because you can see which agent was working, what results come from which agent, etc. Then we have a description of the agent, and again, the same thing here. It's not so important here or crucial here in our example, but for multi-agent system, this thing tells the supervisor, for example, what this agent can do or what responsibility of this agent. So it's more clear when this agent should be called by supervisor. But for us, like we're just following the procedure right here. And this thing is more interesting, is an instruction. The Google called it instruction, but in reality this is a system message. And here we are providing basic instructions, what agents should do, different rules, different restrictions here as well, like goals maybe, etc. Just system message, that's it. And then we have to define a model, and thing which I don't like so much this time, that it's not so rich on model selections. So it's from Google. That's clear that they are trying to push their model in top place, kind of Gemini, and I'm using here Gemini as well. But basically, I think without any problems, you can try to use maybe Anthropic model, like Cloud Sonnet, for example, but the rest is kind of very tricky how to enable. And so basically, just keep this in mind. At this time, at this moment, if you're constructing your agents, most probably you will be forced to use Gemini from Google. It's kind of way of Google to push what they wanted to be on the first line, right? And since this is a React agent, we are defining tools, and this is how it happens. So basically, this one way of creating a tool. I'm providing a class which contains the tools, and I'm providing the method from this class. And then probably this method will be taken and registered as a tools for this agent. And finally, I build in the agent as well. I return it back and assign it to this root agent thing. And basically for us, just as kind of in the main function, when we want to get this agent, we can use get instance and get this root agent. It will be created on the startup time. Okay, it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We have this LM agent. We have the base agent, which is common for all the types. We have function tool. And let's take a look at this research tool class. It's another one. And here I defined the web search tool. I mentioned it already here. So what's happening there, the crucial important points, we need to define the schema. Again, we need to define some description of the function of the tool so the LLM is aware of when this function can be called, what parameters, etc. Just I'm referring to our long chain, long graph series. We have explained a lot there. Just not going to repeat it. So, sorry, this is the first video for you. I would really highly recommend, even if you're not programming in Python, I would highly recommend you to check it. There are a lot of theory on all the stuff. But nevertheless, we have a function. We are defining the description, which tells the LLM, the agent, when this function can be used and why, and which conditions. So this is a search the web for recent information about companies, products, or topics. And we are creating, again, just to refresh your memory, a research agent, financial, which is part of financial advising system. So that's why we are here most strict. We are talking about companies, products, topics. Then we have two parameters. The query itself is a search query, and here the description with some examples as well, and how many results we are providing back. It's another schema, and we are putting description here. And schema is from ADK as well, like again. So what's happening inside this function is not so relevant at the moment. We have a research, we have a query, we have how many results we should return back, and we are just returning, we are reusing web search engine from an extra library, and maybe you would put there your own implementation or something, maybe you know better options. What happens here, we have a search engine, we do the search, we are providing back research results as a map of values. So this is a JSON practically in a Java way. So we are providing back the query which was used and the results. And results is another JSON with title, URL, and snippet. So far so good, right? And this is the only tool we have. And now it's an interesting question, how would you run your agent? And there are a number of ways how you can do this. The easiest one, I would say, is using CLI tool. And for that, we have our agent runner. And practically, this is where all the magic happens. Like, for example, even if you run it via web, it's exactly the same kind of things. And again, referring to long chain, long graph, you have to define thread. Maybe you have to define user ID, some other parameters which would tell you information about the user so you can reuse it in the execution. And this is exactly what happens here in agent CLI runner. So it's there, we have a main method, because this is the kind of entry point for the whole application. And we are defining a run config, which is again from ADK agents. And this is kind of runtime settings for your agent. You can fine tune it, for example, like what should the agent do in case of failures, repeating numbers, something else. But for now, we are using the default one. We are fine with that for a small example, so nothing more here. Then we have to define a runner, And this time again we're taking the most simple one, in memory runner, but again this is kind of an engine, because you have a state machine where your agents, all the agents are run, and then you have to provide some base for that. And here we're saying, okay, this is memory runner. It could be database, for example. Well, probably in memory runners, not for production, right? It's clear. And here we are providing the instance of our agent, and we saw that already. Then I'm defining a user ID, my name, Evgeny, and we creating a new session. And session practically is a short-term memory. So when your conversation happens, for example, you send a request, your agent processes it, maybe makes a couple of tool calls, generates the response, and the cycle is finished, but then you continue the discussion, and then agents should be aware of the previous steps, and that's why you have session here. It's kind of short-term memory, right? So we are creating a session. Here we are putting the runner with the app name, and app name again is the name of our agent, and we are providing the user ID, and we getting back the session with using blocking get. And this is also interesting thing, because basically what you need to understand, the whole framework is built on reactive streams. So it's Rix Java, like here for example, flowable, and the whole architecture is constructed on that. So you need to, like, if you're familiar with reactive programming approach, then okay, it's good for you. If not, okay, you have to learn this as well. And then having the session, what happens here, we have the main cycle of our application. Again, this is CLI tool. So what's happening here, we are scanning for users input, right, until we have a special command quit, where we break the whole execution, the whole cycle. Otherwise, what's happening here, we are creating a content. So this is a very tricky part here. Like, I don't like it so much, again, because we have a string as a user input. Well, in general, we are creating a message here to send to the agent, and the message could contain several parts, and could be, for example, text, could be images, something else, like different input is allowed. And here we are creating a very simple message, so the one that contains from the text. So we have this user input, we are creating parts kind of from this text, and then we are generating content from parts, and here you can provide, for example, several parts, and this is the way we have the content. And basically this is user message. Like, if you're familiar with the terminology of pre-Google ADK era, then this is user message. So what happens next? Look at that. We have a runner, we run it in asynchronous mode, we are providing the session ID, user ID, session ID, we are providing the user message as a starting point for conversation, and our run config. And back we have this asynchronous flowable, which emits events once they are there, and basically all the conversation happens while emitting these events. And again, this is the reactive approach of programming. You have to learn it. So what's happening here, we are just processing all the events once they emit it, and for the demonstration purposes, we are just showing them on the screen so we can see the content of it. And then when event is the last one, the final response, we just also marking it as a final response, so we can see, okay, the whole response was sent back to user. So since this one is a normal Java application, you can run it the way you want. Like, for example, I can use Maven for that, and let me do it. So we have here a prompt, and we can chat with the agent like the normal way. For example, like how are you? And look at that, we have back an event and the content, I'm doing well, thank you for asking, how can I help you today? And for example, I can ask, okay, what is your main responsibility? And maybe what tools can you use? And again, the event and the content, my main responsibility is to recommend one promising company for investment based on the user requests. I use the web search tool to find kind of information, analyze it before making a recommendation. And this was a final response. And let's give it a try, like ask something more specific to recommendation, like, hey, do a research and tell me what can be a good candidate for me to invest in the AI sector. And today is November 1st. And let's take a look at that. And here we are, we have the event. Well, it's pretty long, lengthy one, because we can see the tool responses that contains the snippets from the web pages, and this is really huge. Like, even I'm not sure if I can scroll up here and see the results. There's web pages all the time. Okay, we can see it later in the web interface, but we only have final event that, based on the current report, NVIDIA is a strong candidate, and the company chosen company is NVIDIA, and this is a final response. So this is how it works in the console, and basically, like, we see a lot of data here, and this is because of demonstration purposes, but basically it's up to you, right? Because whatever you show here, like for example, we can only print the final response, the event that has this attribute, and then we can see the response as well without any tool calling. So it's purely up to you, right? And another way you can run your agent via the web interface, and for that, for example, we have this root agent static file thing on the class level. So how to run it? We can use Maven again, and here we are. We have the main class, which is part of ADK library, and it's ADK web server. So we're providing the basic path for our agents. Source agent is target, and we define the port 8000. And look at that. This is a classical Spring application, and what happens here? We can see the discovery, like scanning units for agent units. And it was found total agent with the name research, and it was initialized, and everything is in memory. And now if we go to localhost 80,000, we can see the web interface for that. So it's here we have this agent development kit web interface. We can pick the agent. Now we have the single one, and that's correct. Let me close this. And here we have the same experience, kind of a chatty application, chatbot, where you can put your questions like the same hi there and get back a response. Hello, how can I help you today? And just let me quickly maybe put the same kind of request I used previously in the CDI tool. So do research and tell me what can be a good candidate for me to invest in the AI sector, right? So I'm running it, and look at that. It's okay, I can help you with finding promising company. Then it's a web search tool, and we can see some results here, like details of that. And here's a function tool call. We have a query leading AI companies November 1st, and maximum 5 results, and we have some responses back as well, like this huge page snippet I wasn't able to show you in the CLI tool. And then the final response, like, based on my research, NVIDIA stands out. And this is the agent we just created. Alright, that's it for the first video. I'm really curious to hear your opinion on that, because I really have some mixing feeling, to be honest, like the beauty of the framework, how it's comfortable to work with it. For example, like, maybe I'm used to LangGraph, and for me, even I'm a Java developer basically, but I know Python, but for me Java is the #1 language, and still I feel more comfortable using LangGraph. But anyway, write in the comments what do you think about this framework, if you want to see continuation of this series. And basically we can go through it all together and finally just maybe learn to do this stuff in a new way, with Google way. And it was me, Evgeny. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. I really appreciate it. And well, we will see each other. Hopefully we will see each other next time, next video about Google ADK. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.